Hey guys, in this week's Casually Criterion episode, we're going to review the final film in the Before trilogy, Before Midnight. But before Midnight, we're going to be talking about Tropic Thunder, I'm Thinking of Ending Things, Jumbo, and more. So, get ready.
Before Midnight, I get what you did there. That's clever.
Thank you. It's not often I get to spice it up a little bit in the first little bit.
I'm glad you did.
Yeah, me too. Felt good.
Welcome to the Casual Cinecast, powered by Cinelinks. My name is Justin, and with me, as always, is a guy who has time-traveled here to read a letter from 82-year-old me about my feelings on the Before trilogy in 50 years. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing well. It has, if only you knew what I could read here. Again, just like the poem and just like whatever you asked me to do last week, this will have to be bonus content only.
Yeah. Last week was singing a waltz, but this
That's
year
right.
You have to make up a
That's
letter.
actually the hardest one, so that's the one that's going to cost the most.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right, anyway, if this is your first time listening, this is a Casually Criterion episode, which is a Criterion Collection-focused episode that we like to do usually every other week, and the movies are voted on by the listeners. But before we get into the main review, we'll be doing our usual News on the March, where we talk about recent news and things that we have been watching. So if you have not seen the movie, you can still listen, and then we will go ahead and move into the Casually Criterion review for Before Midnight. It'll be time-stamped. Don't worry about it, so jump around as you see fit.
That's right, and as Mike said, the listeners pick our Criterion films, so you really want to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at Casual Cinecast to stay tuned to when we're doing polls so you can vote. The best place to follow us is Twitter. That is where we actually put the poll up, but we do post about it on other places. So follow us anywhere. If you want to send us questions about the movies we're reviewing or ask us to review a movie, any message at all, send a message to any of those social media accounts or to casualcinemedia@gmail.com. And then, of course, if you haven't done so already, you like the show, give us a review on whatever place you listen to podcasts on, iTunes, Spotify, whatever. I don't know if you can actually review on Spotify, but give us a 5-star review, say some kind words, and we'll feel good inside.
Yeah. And you'll feel good inside for helping us feel good inside.
That's
true. It all works out.
It helps everybody. It's a real win-win.
Yeah, win. Okay, so with that, are we ready to go ahead and move into our News on the March and get this show on the road?
Let's get it on the road.
News on the March!
All right, so we find ourselves here in News on the March, and Mike,
We do.
I want you to tell me what news has been marching in your brain.
Well, there has been some news, but I have not really been paying attention to it. The only thing that's been going on in my life is I have been watching some movie. Well, I've caught up on one movie, and I've seen another movie that I have not seen since theaters.
I'm intrigued.
And so I'll just go ahead and go with the one I have seen first, and that is Tropic Thunder, which is directed by Ben Stiller. It stars Ben Stiller, Robert Downey Jr., Jack Black, and a cast of several others you've heard of.
Mm-hmm.
When's the last time you've seen Tropic Thunder, sir?
I think it was probably about 3 or 4 years ago. I watched it on Netflix, and that was probably only my second, maybe third time to see it, because it was pretty familiar to me, but at the time, I think I remember having only seen it in theaters, but I still knew it really well somehow. So
yeah,
I don't know, maybe 3 times.
Yeah, I think it's been over a decade since I've seen Tropic Thunder. I saw it in theaters and I have not really seen it since then.
Yeah, I think it came out in like 2008, so that checks out to be a little over a decade.
Yeah, it's been like a long time. But I don't know. I'll say that this movie, it's pretty good. It's not bad. I think it's better than I remembered it in a lot of places, and then worse in even more places. So, like, the cast is off the charts. Like Matthew McConaughey, Tom Cruise, that skinny guy from Freaks and Geeks, Jay Baruchel.
Jay Baruchel.
Yeah. Like Jack Black. Everyone is great in this movie. Like, they're all funny. Tom Cruise are kind of ridiculous. You never see Tom Cruise be, which is really, he's even likable when he's being a dick,
Yeah.
So I think that's all great. Some of the skits are funny. It's ballsier than a lot of comedies, I think, made nowadays.
Yeah, I think so.
But that said, there are sections of this movie which I think are just flat out stupid, like bad, that bring the rest of the movie down. And I'm thinking of the entire third act.
Yeah, okay. That's a lot of it, but... even if it's less time,
spoilers
it's a
for Tropic
part.
Thunder, a movie that came out in 2008. As soon as Ben Stiller gets kidnapped by, like, the village, and he goes to the village that's run by, like, a 12-year-old,
mm-hmm.
and he has to do the Simple Jack skit, all of that's terrible. Dreadful, awful, terrible. The main villain being a 12-year-old is incredibly stupid. There's not anything charming about the final act. But other than the, Jack Black, Robert Downey Jr., and Ben Stiller, and everyone else giving it their all. Matthew McConaughey shows up at the end for a pretty good laugh. But I don't know. I mean, do you agree with me on this? I mean, like, I feel like it's a good movie all the way up until that part where it just feels really contrived and... I don't know, like we all of a sudden we entered into like a worse movie.
Yeah, well, everything that I remember fondly from the movie is early on.
Right.
I think what I loved the most about it in theaters, which, I walked away from theaters similar to you. It sounds like not liking the movie that much or thinking it wasn't that good. And I liked it more the second time, but always my fondest memories were the silly trailers at the beginning for each of the actors' movies.
Like Satan's Alley, and then like whatever that fart family is for Jack Black's character.
Yeah. So I remember that stuff being funny, and a lot of stuff where they're like making this movie, and when they're setting up the whole concept, and them kind of figuring it out, thinking they're in a movie. All of that stuff that happens really early on is really good to me and was really funny. And the movie just kind of goes on a slope downhill from there. So yeah, I mean, by the time we hit third act, some of it's not working for me.
It's peaked. Yeah, I agree. But like Steve Coogan's great, Danny McBride is funny, Tom Cruise is funny, Matthew McConaughey is funny. Like everyone in this movie is like delivering a great performance.
Yeah,
like
and I'm still like blown away when I think about the fact that Robert Downey Jr. was nominated for an Oscar for this movie.
Was he really? I forgot about that.
Yeah,
this was hot off the tails of Iron Man, right?
Yeah, it would have been a year later, maybe less.
Yeah, I think less, because Iron Man came out in 2008. So this is like right at the beginning of his like mainstream comeback. Like he had done things like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang previously, but anyway.
Yeah, so maybe that's part of why he was. But yeah, this is Oscars in 2009, so...
Yeah, well,
it's interesting.
That's a crazy thing for him to get nominated for, and I imagine there were probably lots of opinions about that.
I bet. Like, I would like to see that happen now or something similar, just to see how divided the reaction is, and see the discourse and conversations that would come from that. I think would be interesting, probably cringy at times, probably helpful and enlightening too.
Yeah, it's funny because like in the movie they try to have their cake and eat it too, right? Because like they'll have like a black guy on the squad who is constantly like talking down to Robert Downey Jr., who's in like blackface, and he's constantly being like, "You're Australian, man, you're an idiot," or whatever. So he is the butt of a lot of jokes, but like that seems like not enough really to like smooth out that. Yeah, I don't know. It seems a little like, no, you don't understand. We wrote a character to give him a hard time, so it's okay. kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's a touchy subject, so I don't blame anybody for having a problem with it.
No, I mean, like, it's it is what it is.
It is what it is. Yeah.
Okay, so that's all I really have on Tropic Thunder. I just want to say it both aged better and worse over time. So
yeah, honestly, I'm more offended in some ways by the Simple Jack portrayal. It's pretty That's pretty offensive, to be honest.
And the whole, like, you never go full retard speech.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's probably the most tasteless thing in the movie, in my opinion. I agree with that. Because
exactly.
I was like, as I was watching it, I was like, well, this is just, I don't like this. Yeah. But anyway.
Yeah. Moving on, I guess.
Yeah. The other thing that I have been watching is a film that I believe you've seen and you included on your top films of the year. And it just seemed so heavy and deliberate that I wasn't in the mood to watch it before we did that episode, but now I am and was, and I've seen it. So it is I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which is directed by Charlie Kaufman. It is on Netflix. And it stars Jesse Plemons and Jessie Buckley. Is that her name? 2 Jessies.
Mm-hmm. That sounds right to me.
Cool. Well, I got to say, I enjoyed this movie.
Me too.
I will say that I don't want to say I saw it coming, but I will say that I'd say I had figured out about 60% of the movie before they get to like the end and everything starts to kind of unravel.
Yeah.
But I liked it. I liked it quite a bit. I think Jesse Plemons is really good. Jessie Buckley is just, you can't take your eyes off her, man. Her like weird sideways smile that she's always putting on.
Yeah.
And you're just like, what is this adorable human being who is just really captivating to watch, you know?
Yeah.
And then of course,
got such a
Toni
sad
Collette.
face.
Yeah. Sad face. But yeah, I don't know. This movie is interesting. It's not quite as cryptic as like Synecdoche, New York, you know, but it's also more cryptic than something like Anomalisa. You know what I mean?
Definitely. And I would say that by the end, it's not as cryptic. I think up until everything kind of comes together with the ending, you know, I'm trying to be general here. That's when I think a lot of things become less cryptic. Yeah.
But like, I would say it wasn't even really that cryptic previously, because every time it like shows you this one specific character, it cuts away from the main story into this other character. And you're like, why am I following around this person doing his job? You know, I'd say it was pretty obvious early on who that person was.
Yeah, I think so. That part I would agree with is not particularly cryptic, but how that all ties together.
Yeah,
it unravels and wraps up.
Yeah, it goes in like it unflows in a very organic way. It's not like, okay, here's the twist. You know, it's very artfully done, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's a movie I enjoy the ride. I enjoyed wondering what's going on and trying to piece everything together, and then having it come together in a way that made sense and made me want to rewatch and because I think it'll give new meaning to so much of the movie.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. How could it not? You know, where does this rank in the Charlie Kaufman oeuvre for you? You know, speaking strictly of his directorial movies only.
Directorial only? I think this is probably, I guess, number 2. Because I think Anomalisa is amazing.
Me too. I was about to say, really I don't think it tops Anomalisa. That movie is just something else. I don't, you know, I still remember that. You know, I remember times when I've been Anomalisa'd, you know, or I've Anomalisa someone else, you know. And if you don't know what that means, just watch Anomalisa and you'll get it.
Yeah, it's extremely relatable. But that's kind of what Charlie Kaufman deals with is, you know, sort of neurotic, slightly self-loathing and characters that you end up identifying with, I think. And he does it in a way that's true, that's not necessarily so over the top or whatever that they just seem completely unrelatably self-loathing. Like that there's enough truth and generalization in all of it that I always end up connecting with almost every main character in anything he's either directed or even written.
Yeah, I agree. He has this everyman quality about him, but like a thinking man's everyman, I guess, you know? And and you know, Jessie Buckley, we're in her head so often throughout this movie. And I don't know, some of her observations, I think, are just really, kind of fascinating. Like when she kind of is thinking out loud about how one day it's going to be like you look back and then you look back at your previous relationships and you're like, oh, so-and-so, like, why did we break up? We got along. It was nice, And the whole time she's kind of evaluating, like, I'm thinking of ending things. And the subtle truths that he just kind of drops in there through these lines as she's thinking to herself, and how relationships go and how people fade apart and are collide and all these different things. I don't know. I find Charlie Kaufman very relieving because he's super pretentious, sure. But, like, he comes across in, like, a way that seems genuine and not pretentious, even though the subject matter often is, if that makes sense.
It definitely makes sense. I mean, they're so high concept to even put them on film, or we can talk about this as well. I'm actually, this last week, started reading Charlie Kaufman's book. I don't know if you know that he put out a fiction book this last year as well, called Antkind.
Oh, what a busy guy. No, I didn't know it was a fiction book. I knew there was a book, but I wasn't aware. It was like a novel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a novel.
Okay.
So I started reading that. Well, we can talk about it in a second. But what we're saying about this movie and his movies in general and his general sensibilities, that all holds true in the novel so far as well. I'm not done with it, but I'm a good way into it. But one thing I do want to say is that, his characters often seem kind of detached, or, we said neurotic, self-loathing. They tend to be lonely characters or have a lonely sense to them.
Yeah.
But what it does for me is it makes me feel less lonely. You know what I mean? It makes me feel
that you don't have the same neuroses.
Well, I mean, sometimes I do. It's like the truths where I connect with them, where I'm like, oh, I know that feeling, or I know that thought. Yeah. It's not 100% of the time I'm exactly like, the main character in Anomalisa, whose name I can't remember, or Philip Seymour Hoffman and Synecdoche. I'm not identifying with them across the board, but there's just so many little things, and it kind of just makes me feel a little less lonely, or less alone with, like, some of the things that I feel or think, to have them expressed in a way. That's what I get a lot of the times from his films.
Sure. Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. Like, all his characters are different people, right? Like, I am not Nicolas Cage from Adaptation. I am not Joel from Eternal Sunshine, Jim Carrey's character. Like, but I have traits in common with all of these people. And I think that's kind of the essence of him, right? Is he'll take a very specific character that's a lot like him, probably, or, maybe different. But he'll boil down the neuroses and the everyman quality to something that we all identify with. Like, yes, being lonely, being scared of being lonely. In Synecdoche, New York, it's being sick. The idea of your health failing you and getting older in time. So much of this stuff is so relatable, even if the characters, you don't like them, or you're like, well, I'm a little bit more loud than this, or a little bit more outgoing than this. They all find a common truth, I think, that anyone could relate to. And I think that is kind of the essence of Charlie Kaufman, which is, despite who his main characters are, they have these qualities that make you disarmed because they're so vulnerable, even if it's in their head. You know what I mean? You understand what a mess they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad that you liked the movie. That makes me feel good.
Yeah, it was a movie where, like, the first, like, 30 minutes or so, or 45 minutes, I was like, ooh, I'm feeling the length here, But then all of a sudden I just didn't anymore, It's an interesting movie.
Once they get to the house, because it's pretty long on the ride to the house, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and then it's like a ride to the house. There's like 30, 40 minutes in the house, and then there's like, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes of driving, stopping by like a pseudo Dairy Queen, and then a few more minutes of driving, and then it's bizarre structurally, but it works.
It does, and if you like all of these things, then I have to recommend Antkind to you. I think
yes, here we go. Is this the book?
It. Yeah, this is the book. Yeah, it's called Antkind, and not only does it relate to films in the sense that Charlie Kaufman wrote the book, but the main character is a movie critic and writes essays on film.
Sounds like a Charlie Kaufman character, all right.
Yeah. It's very Charlie Kaufman, very much has a lot of inner dialogue that's self-loathing or neurotic and that sort of thing, and feels kind of like an character who's isolated from the world, psychologically speaking. But so far, I'm about 100 pages in, and I'm very, very hooked into this. And I'll kind of give you so far what's happened. I don't know if it's totally what the book's about, because I think there's something like 500 pages to go.
Wow. Okay.
But the main character ends up going to this small town where he encounters a 116-year-old man who lives across the hallway in an apartment that he's staying in temporarily, who has spent the majority of his life making a stop motion film that is 3 months long. And he gets the main character to watch it, and the main character falls in love with the movie based on like the first, I think, 20-30 minutes of it that he sees. Then he agrees to watch it, and he also agrees that like when I get done watching the film, I'll destroy it. But then the guy who makes it is 116th, he dies. So then he's like, well, I'm not going to do that now. My goal is to watch this movie and bring it to the world and show them this genius who's totally undiscovered. Nobody's ever seen this 3-month-long film other than me. And that's kind of where I'm at. And it's got its hooks in me, man. It's really good.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I will have to check this out because, every time filmmakers make the transition to like literature, I find that fascinating.
Yeah.
Quentin Tarantino has been talking about making a novel. He's making a novel for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, right?
That's what I heard. He's going to do the novelization of it.
What a world. What a world.
Yeah, but there's a lot of film knowledge. So for people who are into film, there's a lot of references that the film critic makes up. Some are true and some aren't, so it's really interesting. Like he talks about Robin Williams's movies as a teacher. And of course he name drops like Dead Poets Society, but then he name drops about 10 other fictitious movies that have pretty funny like teaching titles that exist in the world of this movie. So there's a lot of real film history and then a lot of fun made up fake film history. So it's pretty entertaining and it's quite funny too, on top of being surreal and bizarre and dreamlike.
Okay. All
so
right.
Worth your time, worth the listeners' time too, if they like Charlie Kaufman and film.
Cool. And again, that's called Ant-Man?
Antkind.
Antkind. Okay.
Close. But yeah.
Okay. Well, you have it as on the notes as Charlie Kaufman's Ant-Man.
Oh my gosh. Why did I do that?
Yeah. So that's not my fault. I want to specify.
No. I think it's like Kaufman and then Kaufman and then I wrote Ant-Man or something. I don't know. But I'll leave it there. I'll follow up when it's done and maybe give like whether or not I recommend it when it's all said and done.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah. So the other thing that I wanted to quickly talk about was a film that I watched this weekend that I had seen recommended by a guy who like runs the local Alamo Draft House. He plays all sorts of like weird movies, and he had talked about this one. It's from filmmaker Zoe Wittek. She wrote and directed this film. It is a French film, and it stars, I don't know how to say it, Noémie Merlant, who is one of the main characters in Portrait of a Lady on Fire. And the film is called Jumbo. Have you heard of this one?
I have, yes. Okay. I did not get a chance to watch it, though. So please.
Well, that's fine. The really, really short synopsis version of this film is that she lives with her mom. She's kind of a shy, awkward girl in probably her early 20s, very early 20s, I would say. And she's working the night shift as kind of a guard, janitor, cleaner for a carnival / amusement park. And she falls in love with one of the new rides in the park that's like very bright and colorful. It's like it looks like a claw that you would sit in, like the inside of the claw, and it spins around. But she starts to develop an attraction towards it and starts communicating with it and falls in love with it. And of course, like her mother doesn't understand. And
I don't understand.
Yeah. It's maybe not that understandable in the movie, but maybe that's part of the challenge of it,
Sure. Yeah.
I will say that I enjoyed this movie. I was never bored. It's pretty short. It's about an hour and a half. And while I enjoyed watching it, I think the big thing that I'm struggling to put together is what the film is trying to say, whether or not it's supposed to just be kind of entertaining, or is it supposed to be this sort of satirical love story and a commentary on, love romances written by men, and where the man character is just kind of like not interesting at all, but somehow the woman just falls in love with him because he's the main character.
Oh yeah, well,
you know what I mean?
Do you think that's what they're trying to say, or is that just what
I don't know. That's like a possible interpretation I was feeling during the movie. I also thought maybe it's trying to use the amusement park ride as a representation of how parents don't accept their children's, maybe sexual preferences or partner preferences, and end up overreacting in some way. Or possibly it's this like satire of the worst fears of people who are anti-LGBT and anti-gay marriage, who think that, if we let gay people get married, then what's next? They're going to marry a car.
The old slippery slope conundrum.
The slippery slope argument. Yeah. Like, is it taking that to an extreme? I don't really know. And that's one of the things that's a barrier to the movie, but also intrigues me about the movie at the same time. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. Well, your description of it has me intrigued, but I don't know. I'm reminded of that movie a long time ago that came out about the killer tire.
Rubber.
Yes. Is there any greater truth? Is there any greater meaning? I don't know. Do I regret watching it? No, not at all,
Yeah, that's a fair description, I think. This one isn't necessarily funny.
Yeah, well, neither was that, really.
Okay, well, it seemed funny based on the trailer. I actually never saw the movie.
I think it wasn't not funny. It just was like, it's so bizarre and out there that you're like, you could laugh at the absurdity of it all, or you could, just kind of watch it unfold. I found myself watching it more than like getting a kick out of it. But I've never forgotten that movie, So
that's good. I don't think I'll ever forget this movie. I mean, one of the things that's so interesting about it, it is sort of played straight as like this love story. It doesn't necessarily, other than the characters' reactions, the movie doesn't really seem to treat it like a bizarre, weird thing. And one of the most interesting things is this movie is, in some ways, it's kind of shot to remind me of a horror film, or like a dark, modern sci-fi sort of film. Like I definitely got a lot of under the skin tone and vibe to this movie. And there's definitely some pieces of it that feel like almost direct references to Under the Skin, or directly inspired by some scenes in Under the Skin. And if you watch the movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. But there was that similar tone of
she leads
kind of dark
amusement park rides into a room and then makes them sink into the floor when she takes off her clothes.
That's not that far off, though, to be honest.
All right.
It's not that far off. So
now I want to watch Under the Skin.
Yeah. Well, watch this one too, and let me know what you think. But
okay, I'll watch it a double feature.
Yeah, I recommend it. I don't know where necessarily it's available, other than the place that I watched it, that I won't say. But it's out there, I think, or
it's
coming
be found.
soon. I think this movie is so weird that it'll get its attention and make it to some places.
Yeah, it reminds me of, and I didn't see it but another movie that came out earlier this year called Swallow.
I don't know that one.
Well, I've never seen it, but on the cover, it's a woman looking at like a thumbtack enticingly, like she wants to swallow it. And apparently it's about her just swallowing things that are dangerous for her.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't brought myself to want to watch that yet, but it strikes me as a movie where, like, when you describe the plot to me, I'm like, what's the point of this? But then who knows what the point is when I actually watch it.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those movies that's like the concept is so specific.
Yeah.
And you think, how do you make a movie out of that?
Yeah, like, how is this worthwhile?
Yeah. I'm with you. I get the same vibes from that concept.
Yeah. Anyways, but sounds like we've both had a pretty eventful week as far as watching stuff goes. You have sounds like a cooler week than I'd had, but
I don't know. Maybe.
You're reading a book, though, sir.
I'm always reading a book, man.
Yeah. I am not reading as often as I need to be reading. As often as I would like to be reading.
Yeah. I mean, this is weird and maybe a little off topic for a film podcast, but I was having trouble going to sleep at night because I would watch things up until time to shut everything off and go to bed.
Yeah.
And, I was kept hearing that like, oh, the blue light from like TVs or your phone or screens is like disrupts your rhythms or something like that, your nighttime natural body rhythms. So it was recommended to me to like start reading at least 30 minutes to an hour before you go to bed and shut off the screens. And since then, like that's what I've been doing. So that's why I'm like reading stuff every week and doing that as like a habit. And it's actually really been great for my like sleeping and staying asleep and falling asleep easier. So highly recommend reading.
Yeah, I'm one of those people that just stays up until I'm like, ooh, I could go to sleep now, and then I do it.
Yeah.
So yeah. Being a responsible adult, something I need to get on board.
It's okay. I mean, if nothing else, it's great to like knock out a bunch of stuff and read, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's the thing is like, I love going to the bookstores and buying books, and then like they just sit on my shelf and collect. And at this point, I have so many books I need to read.
Yep, same. So I've been working my way through them over the past couple of years since I've started this habit.
Good for you, sir.
Yeah, but that is
All
it
right.
for me. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, no, I think we are ready for Before Midnight. What do you say?
Let us go. Let us go. Let us go.
Let us away.
Hey, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
If we're meeting for the first time today on a train, would you find me attractive?
Of course.
No, but really, right now, as I am, would you start talking to me? Would you ask me to get off the train with you?
Well, I mean, you're asking a theoretical question. I mean, what would my life situation be? I mean, technically, wouldn't I be cheating on you?
Okay, why can't you just say
No,
yes?
I did. I said, of course.
I
That
wanted
was-
you to say something romantic and you blew it, okay?
Okay. All right, wait. If I saw you on a train, okay, listen, I would lock eyes with you. And I'd walk right up to you and I'd say, hey, baby, you are making me as horny as a billy goat in a pepper patch.
Stop it! That's disgusting! Billy Goat? No, the truth is, okay, you failed the test. And the fact is, you would not pick me up on a train. You would not even notice me, a fat-ass middle-aged mom losing her hair.
Okay.
Yeah, that's me.
You set me up to fail on this
Okay,
one. You
true,
did, all right?
true.
All right. But in the real world, Baldy, okay, on game day when it mattered, I did talk to you on a train, okay? I did that. It was the best thing I ever did.
Really?
Right?
Look at the goats.
Hey.
Hello.
All right, so as always with our Criterion films, we will not be doing a spoiler-free section up front, so this is your spoiler alert, your spoiler warning. We will be going into discussion about the movie that may or may not include spoilers right away, so if you have not seen Before Midnight, pause the podcast right now, go watch it, and if you haven't actually seen any of the other movies, you should watch those first, watch the whole trilogy and end with Before Midnight, and then come back and finish listening to this episode.
All right, so Before Midnight was directed by Richard Linklater. It stars Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy. The IMDb synopsis says, we meet Jesse and Celine 9 years on in Greece. Almost 2 decades have passed since their first meeting on that train bound for Vienna.
I love this synopsis because it feels like someone, by the time they got to writing the third one, was like, I'm over it.
Yeah.
It doesn't put much heart into it, really.
No, in fact, the synopsis completely relies on the fact that like Before Sunrise exists, But I think that's probably fair because I don't know if anyone would really get a lot out of this movie without having seen the previous two. What do you think?
I totally agree. This movie is such a cap on the trilogy as a whole, and without a cap or a head or body to sit on, a cap just falls to the ground. Is that a real metaphor? I don't know. I'm making it up as I go.
Yeah, it works, though. It works. So, so you have seen this movie before.
True.
Why don't you go ahead and let us know what you think of it, how it held up the second time?
Yeah, sure. So, as you said, this is not my first time to see it. It is, in fact, my second. I saw it shortly after it came out. I think this is back in the video store days. I actually rented this Blu-ray from the local video store when this came out. I was very excited about it. I didn't get a chance to see it in theaters. I don't think it came anywhere near me at the time since I was living in small town East Texas going to college at the time. Mm-hmm. But I was a huge fan of Before Sunrise and Before Sunset. So this came out. I was like, I have to see it, have to watch it. And, you know, I liked it a lot then. I thought it was really, really interesting. And like the other films, it's really well written, really well acted. I love the way that it's minimally shot. I don't know if this one is more minimally shot than the others, but it feels like it. There are so many single shot long takes in this. But all that aside, I think that I definitely didn't like it as much. You know, I tend to enjoy that sort of movie cinematic romance, you know, even if it's cheesy or, you know, romantic comedies, that sort of thing. And this film really threatens to ruin the other two in certain ways, like Before Sunrise and Sunset, which are very romantic movies to me. And this was not that. It is not what I expected the first time. And that said, watching it last night, I was blown away. After being in a relationship, pretty much I was in a new relationship whenever I watched Before Midnight, and I am still in the same relationship. I'm married now, and I am just blown away by the way this movie feels so truthful and accurate and honest, and hits home, you know, in some ways that like I could have never known, you know, only being, I think about a year into my relationship, maybe less than a year when I watched it for the first time. And I like it so much more this time. And as I said before, I think without the other two movies, you know, it's probably a pretty interesting movie getting to know these characters, but sitting on the other two movies and what this does overall for what the trilogy as a whole is interested in and interested in learning about, I think is really, really perfect. And I love that it kind of evolves into its view on love and relationships and life from what I think are pretty to quote the movie a little bit, fairy tale romance movies with Before Sunrise and Before Sunset in some ways anyways. But yeah, I like it a lot. So I'll leave it there. There's a lot more to discuss, I'm sure. But Mike, this is your first time, I believe. So I want to know what you think.
Yeah, so I saw this movie a couple of days ago, and I have been really wrestling with how I feel about it. I like it. I think it's a good movie. I think, objectively speaking, it's a good movie. It's well acted, well written, you know. It feels like a Richard Linklater movie. It's got Ethan Hawke. It's got, you know, existential dialogue. You know, those are staples, I think.
They are.
I don't know that I love it. Obviously, I don't love it as much as Before Sunset. I think Before Sunset will remain my favorite.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think it's a better movie than Before Sunrise, though not as fun to watch.
Certainly not as fun to watch.
Yeah. Like, Before Sunrise feels like a very indie 90s movie, written by a young up-and-comer. This feels deliberate. It feels slow. The whole premise of, like, you know, making the most of the time before a certain time hits, it doesn't even seem to be hammered home in this movie at all, you know?
No.
They just kind of hang out one night, and then, you know, the movie ends and it's dark, so we assume it's close to midnight.
Yeah. Fair.
I think, honestly, that might hurt the movie a little bit, in my opinion. I think these movies work better with the formula of we only have so much time to, like, squeeze in this, you know? Let's make the most of it. So I think this movie maybe would have worked a little better with more of a ticking clock element.
Sure. Something
that they had to, like, hurry up and, you know, hang out a little bit before they part ways for, you know, a couple weeks or something. I don't know, but I don't think the movie's as strong as I wanted it to be, but what it does right, I really enjoyed. It complicates these characters in a way to where it kind of takes the romance out of them. They're older. They're like, life is messy, you know, like, I really appreciated how this movie starts out dealing with the fallout and the consequences of Ethan Hawke's actions from the end of the first one. Like, the man destroyed his family. You know, I even talked about it in the last episode. Like, is he a good guy? I don't know.
Yeah,
you know,
and I don't know. He knows.
And I appreciated that so much because I still don't know. The fact that he feels bad about it is good, but like the situation that seemed to have unfolded over the last 9 years doesn't make me like him very much, or her, to be honest with you.
Or Celine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're kind of shitty people, but that's not necessarily what the trilogy's about. Whether or not they're shitty, it's about their connection. I think it's fascinating that, now, the first time they had idealized one another. So by the time the second movie rolled around, it was all about what could be. And now they both know what could be. They've been living it for 9 years. They have a family together. So long gone is the honeymoon phase.
Right.
And I don't know. I think that's an interesting place to find them. Probably the only natural place we could have gone from the first two films is, what does this idealized, ultra-romantic romance look like when it plays itself out, And so it's messy, it's complicated, it's not as satisfying and sweet as the other two, but it's replaced with something else that I don't know makes me happy, but I'm still happy that, spoilers for the end of the movie, they're working through it. Or They seem to be working through it. It's starting to be a struggle, and I don't know if they're going to make it. But they're still giving it their all, even though they haven't really always been the best to each other, And I don't know. It's fascinating, the stuff this movie goes through. So that was a really long-winded way of saying, I think it's just as good as Before Sunrise, but I will probably watch it less out of all three of these movies, like the least.
Yeah. Do you think you would ever just watch one of these movies in isolation?
Maybe Before Sunset.
Yeah, I agree that it's the best. I don't think this is as good as that one.
Yeah. So let me ask you, like I said earlier, we see the results of his actions almost in the first scene, when he's kind of reckoning with his son going back. Where do you come down on that? Because, he is very much like, hey, what do you say we try to move to America? He's trying to make it work with both families as much as he can. And I feel like she's not really meeting him halfway on that. Even a little bit.
No, and I think what works so well about this film is they take so many of those elements that they had throughout these movies, the previous two movies, and maybe even some of the things that attracted them to one another, and turn that of what is it like after you've been around that for a long time, or what is that like when your life depends on that? And in this particular example of her not really meeting him halfway, it's her inherent, independent feminism type thing, right? Yeah. Where, towards the end they're fighting, they're talking about her feeling like the mom who does all the work, who takes care of all the kids. She is supposed to not have her dream job because, she accuses him of not wanting her to succeed and be more successful than him. And I think we kind of see that come to a head and come to, a possible point of irreparable division in this movie. Yeah. But that was one of those things that is attractive about her in the first two films, right? When she's just the girl that you've met, and attractive about her to Jesse, to Ethan Hawke's character. I mean,
yeah, no, I agree with you. I just found, and like I said, I'm sure this isn't the first time they've had these conversations, right? Obviously, she likes his son. He comes to stay there. They get along. But it seems like, because she's just now getting the job she wanted and all that stuff. It does seem unfair to up and ask her to move to the United States for a little bit.
Yeah.
It's upending their whole lives. But also at the same time, she was okay with him upending his life to be with her.
Yes.
So it feels like maybe there should be a little bit of a compromise there. It's not like she hasn't lived in America before. Like it's a completely new, crazy concept to her.
Well, she did go with him at first, right?
Right. And then even in Before Sunset, she said she lived in New York for a few years.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's not like she can't do it. So I don't know. I found that not necessarily that it's her fault, but I find it fascinating that we're seeing these tensions, of 9 years really starting to boil to the surface.
Yeah, I think the thing that I will say in her defense maybe is that she does make the point, and it's a point that I understand and agree with, of, well, what are we moving back there for? Every other weekend with him? That's not enough. She says, if it was something more, I would do it, or I would consider it and be for it. But
right.
What is that? That's not enough. You're not going to get more than that. And
right.
To move
and
all the way
also,
back there
you can't
that,
blame her for not wanting to move to the country where the ex-wife that hates her is,
Oh, yeah. I mean, it definitely, it sounds awful. And that's one of the things this movie kind of examines is, what do we sacrifice for each other? Yeah.
And that's that's probably the element that I really appreciated, because that's something that I have been wondering about since I saw Before Sunset. I've been wondering, what does this relationship look like? How did Ethan Hawke end that? And apparently not gracefully. He's not proud of the way he handled it. And I like that was acknowledged, right? This grand romantic gesture of an ending that we all love so much, right? Is something that in real life would be unacceptable.
It has repercussions, and we're watching a lot of those, play out, or have played out, see how they have played out, and are continuing to, have repercussions even 9 years on.
Yeah, and will never not have repercussions. It has destroyed his family and done irreparable damage to the relationship with his son. So,
yeah, and maybe that's not 100% certain that it's going to damage him. It's certainly going to impact him in some way. But even Celine, Julie Delpy, she says, he's a good kid. Maybe you need to joke around with him about it, or let him take it easy with him and not make it such a huge deal, because he seems okay. So this is an interesting thing, and that's one of the things where the movie really bizarrely hits super close to home for me, because my mom, my dad, not together. I would go fly to spend summers with him, and literally same time as happens in this movie, when I was about to go to my freshman year of high school, that's when my dad suddenly wanted me to come live with him. And I think he started feeling that he's about to enter high school, and he needs a father figure. He needs to be around, so this movie is weirdly accurate to my life.
Yeah, I hear it.
Starting out, and I can say that having grown up that way, it's not the crisis that it feels like from someone who hasn't grown up that way, and watches that play out, or maybe someone imagines it to be, or maybe even my dad or anyone else in my life imagined it to be for me. That's just how life is.
Yeah, no, it is, but I like to see him struggling with it, and
I do too.
The idea that did I fail as a father? Did I,
Yeah,
I don't know. I think it's a question that I'm glad he's mature enough to ask himself in this movie.
Me too. I find it really interesting, and what's also interesting to me too is just this film's concept of love and life, and how that grows from feeling very centered around a relationship. The first two movies they're about Jesse and Celine, and those are our two main characters, and barely is there a shot without them in it, or focused on other characters. And I think as they're in their relationship and they grow up, what is also very important is the people around you, the people you interact with, become just as important as the relationship, or at least you're not so focused on the relationship that you're centered around it. And I think the movie itself and the script and camera evolve with them in that way. that we're having other characters with major dialogue, characters that get to join in their discussion. They get close-ups, they get cutaways to their reactions.
Yeah, they get
right?
personalities, they get their own responses to seeing Jesse and Celine's reactions. They see their love, they see their fights, they see, all of it. And we kind of get to see, a young couple, an old couple, and an old man who's lost his wife,
Mm-hmm.
And all with like different outlooks on love and points of view on love. And I think that's pretty fascinating. And I agree with you. In the first two movies, they just have each other to go off of. Each other and hypotheticals and one days and so on, right? And then, in the second movie, Ethan Hawke can talk a little bit about his marriage or his kids. And she talks about her exes and whatnot. But in this movie, they have mutual people that they need to talk about and discuss, and people that have been shaping their lives. They have their children they need to talk about. They have their friends and the people that invited them, the people that admire Jesse's work from afar, that Celine has to kind of like bite her tongue,
Mm-hmm.
All of these things, I think, they don't seem like they're about the relationship. Because at first when I was like, man, this movie is like breaking up the formula,
It very much breaks it up.
This movie's like throwing curveballs at me, and it's not the same kind of movie that I wanted or expected. But I think those scenes are necessary because they've been together so long. We need to see them react to the world.
Yeah.
Instead of just them in a bubble again, in this unrealistic nowhere land where they have no obligations or responsibilities. We need to see what love looks like when there's lots of responsibility and there's lots of pressure and obligations and weight added on to that love, and what that would do to people,
Right. And they mention it, I think, in the movie that, when is the last time that we've just wandered around and bullshitted like this?
Yeah, it was
and
like
it's before the kids.
Right before she had kids, right?
Yeah. And so I think we need to go through that because there is this sense that there is no Celine and Jesse by themselves anymore. It's the family of four, or sometimes the son's around, or they're staying with other people, or when either of them get alone time, it's when they're doing other things like for their jobs and stuff. So
right.
The movie does break up the formula, but I think it works really well that it evolves to include all these other people and kind of give us a long period of time where they aren't the only ones on screen. And, eventually we get there when they're on their walk by themselves and in the hotel room. But up until then, there is no just Celine and Jesse in a bubble walking around anymore. And that even extends to one of my favorite, like, just overall scenes in the way that it plays out in all one shot, but like the shots through the windshield, those long scenes of them driving and talking from just that single camera. I don't think it's any accident necessarily that we just constantly have the two kids kind of napping in between so we can see them. They're always there, right?
Yeah, they're always in the frame.
Yeah.
Ever present.
Can't get away from, even when it's the two of them talking at that point, there's other people around and there's phone calls that interrupt, that sort of thing.
And I like how we get to like sort of an evolution, right? Like the car ride there, like from the airport where, he's eating the apple and she's giving him a hard time, you're going to eat the apple? And he's like, oh, there's I see a spot here that's not brown or whatever. And he's like, you're taking food out of your children's mouths. And like that playful banter, So like we see the couple that we always dreamed they may become, at the very beginning. We see it work.
Yes.
We see them in their good zones, right? Where they love each other and they're good to each other and making each other laugh and they're engaged with one another's lives about jobs and et cetera. And then it starts to get sort of uncomfortable whenever they're at the lunch scene and she starts bringing up her jealousies, right?
Yeah, and her just issues in general, like little grievances.
Yeah, but I think the thing I got most uncomfortable about is like her impression of the young fan.
Yeah. That's pretty...
It's like, that was really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And later, she kind of even calls him out on it, and he doesn't deny it. And he even actually just says that he knows about like a little fling she's had, and that was something that like, I don't want to say upset me about these two, but I was disappointed, right? Like I liked the idea of them not hurting each other and being good to each other. And it's kind of sad to know that like, even even like these star-crossed lovers sort of, like it's such a realistic portrayal of a romance that like even they have strayed from one another at times,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, that was unexpected for me.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that shocked me that I didn't remember when that conversation comes up. I was like, oh, he didn't do that. Jesse wouldn't. They love each other. Why would they, stray? And maybe that's a little bit romantic, a little bit optimistic. So it does take me aback still, even this time, that he didn't end up saying, no, I never did that. Please stop being dumb or something,
Yeah. Instead he's just like, well, I know about that one thing you did, but it's okay because I know you love me. So like, I don't know. It's interesting to me, the idea that like they've both hurt each other in their own relationship with each other, and they're both still trying to make it work. Although it seems like she's having a little bit more hangups on it and didn't expect to be called out on it. So I don't know. I wish we could have gotten more of that. We just kind of scratched the surface of it.
Yeah. Well, that's just, it's so true in relationships and stuff that you definitely start to feel those grievances. You kind of start to focus on or feel that you're the one getting the short end of the stick, and really, it's all a compromise. It's all, it's all probably pretty even in the end. It's just like when you are around someone so much, or you get, into fights and you're heated and not necessarily thinking rationally, you tend to do that. You tend to like ignore anything wrong you've done and like start to blame the other person, right? Like that's just what happens. And that's one of the things this movie does so well, is like get that sort of that fight in there of when you are totally being like selfish in a fight, or like saying things that you don't necessarily mean because you're mad, or
or because that like that you can be ugly to this person and they can take it and they're not gonna like they're not gonna hold it against you later.
Exactly. Yeah. And the things that will really get under their skin, right? So you want to like upset them if they're trying to be rational and you're not being upset, right? Or vice versa. Like you all of these little things about them, and you can use those as little knives to try to stick in them. You know what I mean? Metaphorically speaking, right? And it's just so. It's one of those things that just feels really honest to me.
I agree, and well, first of all, I think it's weird that like Julie Delpy goes for like 15 minutes without a top on.
Yeah,
and like
that's weird.
It was a really bizarre scene. Like it seemed natural, it seemed real. It was just weird.
Yeah, especially one of the things we talked about in Before Sunrise was that they cut away from the sex scene.
Yeah,
in the park. Yeah. And now they finally do show us some passion, some sexual interaction with them. But of course, like they kind of start to bicker and then eventually end up in a fight midway through it.
Exactly.
And so like that's the time they choose to show us all of that, is in the middle of that, and not necessarily in a passionate, romantic, loving situation.
Yeah. It's interesting to see what is sex between people who've been together 9 years and had twins and all that stuff look like. They give it a shot, but then like something as easy as a phone call can like really take them out of the mood. And then, just life happens every now and then. So like, it's kind of this like rare brief moment where like they had a brief time to shine, but life just kind of crushes it out, which is, you kind of get the impression that, this is probably how their sex goes. And it has been for a couple years. Like they're not super passionate anymore. Like they'll do it, but it doesn't take much to kill the mood and have like the world come, crashing into their hotel room.
Yeah. Even getting away, they can't get away. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
But, to me, there is a certain aspect of this movie that can be a little depressing, after watching the other two and kind of falling in love with these characters or falling in love with their love, where you at a certain point you were watching them in like a knockdown, drag out fight for, I think about 30 minutes of the movie,
Yeah.
And it kind of wears on you. And I think that's one of the things that really changed for me from the first viewing to this viewing is the first time I was just like, oh my gosh, these two are like, they do not like each other. They do not love each other anymore. This isn't working out. Does love exist, because they're not working out and they seem so in love, all that sort of thing. And this time, it really hit home. And then of course, Ethan Hawke says it in the end, I think, that this is what love is like, this is what being committed to each other is through the crazy and through the amazing. Right. And that to me is like what makes me feel not so depressed by some things in this movie, or not to come away with this sort of like negative downer ending, with the whole third act being that fight, is this idea of like, well, that's what love is. You're going to fight. You're going to be
quote, break
annoyed
up
by
for a
each
minute.
other. You're going to want to break up and then you stay together. You're going to say things you don't mean, etc. Like, and that to me is what I kind of walk away from. And what I feel is like the like cap on the whole trilogy is like, we go from these like super romantic one night only sort of idea of love, like one night stand, best one night stand ever, then to like getting back together. And then like, well, we're going to follow, we've ignited this again and we're in love and we're going to probably stay together and I'm going to miss my flight, to, well, this is how it really is. This is love as well. It's just not the fairy tale.
Right. Well, it's like this exploration of like, even people who have the perfect history to make you think that like, if there was ever a relationship that was going to last, it would be this one, like even with their cool meet cute and their cool story and their 9 years of idealization of one another, even all of that is not enough for 9 years of just constant companionship with that person.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what we get the scene at lunch or dinner, whatever it is, with the young couple, because they have a sort of a meet cute story as well, right? Of him seeing her act, and it's not as great as Celine and Jesse, but they certainly seem in love. And even Celine, whenever the thing gets brought up, she's kind of downplaying how romantic it was at this point in their life, right? And she's annoyed by the books, right? Whenever the hotel clerk wants both of them to sign the book, especially she doesn't really want to sign it, right? I think she's kind of annoyed with that. So even the most romantic beginning fades, right? Or wanes.
Yeah. Well, especially as she starts to feel like all his fans idealize her as some sort of like, I don't know, slut, I guess, or like sexual being, And it's like everyone who like wants to meet her is envisioning her the way he envisioned her for 9 years before he got to see her again,
Yeah, which isn't her. And that's one of the things, I was really feeling during Sunset, and definitely this one too, is the toll of being the main character in a book like that, and what
being
that
fictionalized.
takes on you. And reading, she mentions it in Sunset for sure, but like reading about yourself and how that feels, that's like really reading like what someone else thinks of you and like a whole book worth. That seems daunting to me. Like it would be not fun.
Well, and it also seems, I don't want to say unflattering, but it also seems like if I read that, I don't think my first reaction would be like, oh, how sweet and romantic. I'd be like, did they know me? Like, like I'm just me, like I'm not like the dream girl or dream guy of anyone's choice, right? I'm just this person that this guy met and then decided to idealize, So,
sure.
Yeah, I think there's a certain amount of pressure that comes with that as well, where she's just like, I don't even want to try to live up to this. This isn't fair.
Yeah, there's expectations of the people to meet her. You could tell the hotel clerk lady with the books was, thought very highly of her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's how, like, if you were a fan of that book and that writer, and you knew that like it was sort of autobiographical, and he ended up marrying the girl that he wrote this about after the book was written, while he met her on tour again, like that would be an amazing story, and you would feel a part of that if you were there for that, and you loved that book. That's like if you were a fan of that author, I imagine you probably know about that story, and it's something that gives you great joy, because love is real, romance is real,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's funny that, I kind of feel that way about Sunrise and Sunset, this sort of fairy tale romance, fall in love with these characters, and then this movie kind of pulls the rug out from under people who think that way in a way.
Yeah, and I appreciate it for that, right? Because that's the question I always had after Before Sunset. Like, okay, they're going to get together, but like they've only ever spent like 48 hours or less together, so what is that even going to be? So anyway, yeah, fascinating stuff. And I think Before Midnight is a worthy cap so far to the trilogy, although I hear they're going to keep making them, or I heard they're at least thinking of making another one.
Yeah, that makes sense. It'll outdate my box set, but the Criterion one, but whatever.
Yeah.
I will be
box
curious.
Sets are made to be outdated.
That's true. I will be curious about some of the things that they do where I feel like this movie in particular, and some of the other movies too, but there's all these sort of bookends to the movies, or places where like the movie picks up where the other one kind of left off in some ways. And that's one of the things that makes this trilogy feel kind of whole. And I was wondering if, will they ever do one, or is this has this said everything it needs to say? Which I don't think so, because I think 9 years will go by and you'll have a lot more to say. So I could see them making other ones.
Well, pretty soon you can start making movies about kids graduating high school, the empty nest syndrome. You can start making about getting older and health problems. You could do all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Someone's parents died.
Mm-hmm.
Someone, they have a lot of life that they haven't explored that they could like really do that.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure it amounts more to like, yeah, love can be hard sometimes.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. But I did want to talk about those bookends though, now that we've done like the whole trilogy, because I did find some of them really interesting. And some of the examples would be like Before Sunrise. The end of that movie is that sort of montage of seeing everywhere that they've been, that they're no longer at anymore. And Before Sunset opens up with all of the empty places that they're going to be and going to walk through. So there's sort of a continuation, which I thought was kind of interesting until I watched this one. And I remembered that, Sunset ends with him missing a flight, and then Midnight picks up with Jesse putting his son on a flight.
Yeah.
And making him make it right on time.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't know, that's just this fun little, story continuation that I thought was really fun. But the other bookends that I think happen are, one of the things that sparks them to talk when they're on the train in Sunrise is when that angry fighting couple goes by them on the train.
Yeah.
And that's what they're like, they start talking because of them. And of course, the third act of this film is them having a big fight. They've turned into that couple. Right?
Yeah, they have.
And then also, of course, I think Jesse uses time travel and old Celine to get her off the train in Sunrise. And then that's also how he comes back to her in the final scene to apologize and, try to make things right from this fight.
Yeah.
So some nice little mirrors.
I thought that was a cute scene, by the way. Just like the final ending section where she's just trying so hard not to find him charming.
Mm-hmm. And he is, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, he's Ethan Hawke.
Like
he's
it.
charming. Yeah, he knows what he's doing.
So, I think I end up feeling pretty hopeful for them, despite how horrible and awful I felt for them for about 30, 40 minutes there, where I was like, is this movie going to end with them like potentially not being together?
Yeah.
Which maybe it still does, but I don't know.
I don't think so. I think we're supposed to get the impression that they're going to keep working on it, especially given like her final line where she says like, this must end up being a great night, or better end up being a great night, or something like that.
Oh yeah, like the best sex you've ever had is
or something like that. Yeah.
Greece.
So, there's hope, there's enthusiasm there. I would like to see another one. It's coming up soon, next year, right?
Oh wow, you're right. Yeah, I'm
if
in.
They're gonna do
watch it.
Seems like Richard Linklater can knock a movie out in like 3 weeks.
Yeah. I feel like this one can't have taken that long to film.
No. If they filmed Before Sunset in like 14 days, it seems like a lot of the camera work in this one is just like, okay, let's set the camera up. Let's have another B camera over there to get some additional shots and go.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of tripods, wide shots. Like that whole section of like Ethan Hawke talking to the elderly man who like invited him there, and the other guy, like the bearded dude.
That is crazy book ideas.
Yeah, about his crazy book ideas. That whole section is just like, there's like one camera getting close-ups of people, and another camera's just sitting there on a wide shot.
Yeah.
And letting the background do all the work.
Yeah, the hotel is shot super minimally too, especially because we spend so much time with moving shots and them walking and talking. And then we get to the hotel and it's just static tripod shots for a lot of it.
Even like the car stuff, it's just like a static camera on the dash.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it.
That's all. Well, cool. I don't know. I don't think I have anything else on this trilogy. It's been great to revisit it.
Yeah, it has been great to revisit it. It's too bad that our other co-host Chris could not join us for this trilogy because he's the one that recommended it. But you know what? Hope you enjoyed the episodes, Chris.
Yeah, that's life.
Yep. Life is messy if this trilogy has taught us anything.
That's true. Cool. Well, now that we're at the end of this trilogy, we need to pick another Criterion film. And so we need to do another poll where we choose some Criterion movies for the listeners to vote on what we watch next.
Yes.
So I think I've got the theme for this one, if you're ready.
I am.
Okay, so the theme for this one is second chance movies. So this is going to be a movie that, whoever chose it, they've seen the film once, maybe twice. I would guess maybe only once, considering it's called Second Chances. But a film that maybe you didn't quite understand, didn't quite get, maybe you didn't like it, maybe it was just kind of a mystery to you, and maybe you enjoyed it, but it just, you couldn't wrap your head around it or something, and you're like, think I need to watch that again,
right?
And to really understand how I feel about it. So second chance movies. So that's where we're at. So Mike, what is your choice for the poll?
All right. So for second chance Criterion, I didn't even realize, I did, but I had forgotten that this was added into the collection. So this is a film by David Fincher. The only David Fincher film I've seen and actively do not like. Well, that's not true.
Oh, wow.
I don't like Alien 3. But that's not his fault.
That one. Nah.
Yeah, so I'm talking about The Game.
Wow. Okay, I forget about this movie too until you bring it up.
This
you
is
bring it
Michael
up sometimes.
Douglas, Sean Penn, I believe.
Yes, you're right.
And the stupidest ending to any respected movie I've ever seen.
Okay, well, if it gets voted on, we'll watch it again. I remember not disliking the ending as much as you, but it obviously I didn't like it that much either. So if it gets picked, we can certainly debate the ending probably.
Oh,
unless
yes.
I agree with you.
Yeah. Well,
then we'll just rag on it for
then we'll just
15 minutes.
unload. All right.
Cool.
What about you, sir? What is your second chance selection?
Okay, so I'm going to go with another film that's a little bit more modern. Well, at least yours is yours was 90s. I consider that modern and compared to a lot of other Criterion things.
Yeah, why not?
But this is a 2010 film from Lena Dunham called Tiny Furniture. Which is a film that I wanted to like, and I watched it while I was in film school as kind of, it's this super indie movie that made it to Criterion. Like, I can't wait to watch it. It must be great. And I was just kind of left flat by it.
That's how I felt about her show.
Girls?
Yeah. I watched 4 seasons, and I was like, this is shit.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's strong feelings. I have never actually seen it, based mostly on my opinion of Tiny Furniture when I watched it for the first time. So
I've never seen Tiny Furniture, I don't think.
Well, there you go. So I want to give it a second chance, man. Cool.
I'm not a big fan of Lena Dunham as a person. I think she's pretty unbearable. But, she is talented, I think, right? I wasn't a big fan of Girls, but she's prolific. She's motivated, so I don't know. I've always been interested to watch this movie. So,
yeah, I think she's, unflinchingly honest about some things. That's the vibe that I've got from what little I have seen of Girls, even though I've never seen like a full episode. She's not afraid to go to some very personal places, and things that other people might exclude because they don't want to go there. She will.
Yeah, definitely in her writing. I think she's a stronger writer than she is likable person, if that makes sense. So I don't know. I don't want to get into it, but just Google Lena Dunham. There's plenty of stuff that she's said and done that sucks.
Okay.
Not
Cool.
Speaking of her work. But yeah, so Tiny Furniture is something that I would actually like to watch again. I remember when we were in film school, people were talking about this movie because it was filmed with similar cameras that we were using.
Oh, it was. That is one of the reasons that we watched it. I remember. I believe it was a Canon 7D, if I remember.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was a 5D or a 7D, so
it might have been a
want to speak
5D, honestly, because the 7D doesn't look great.
Yeah, neither does the 5D really, but it looks better.
Oh yeah. Definitely, it's a comparison saying the 7D doesn't look great.
Yeah,
but
so,
that's too nerdy for probably most people.
Yeah, I'd be down to watch either of these movies. Hopefully, my opinion can change on The Game if that wins.
Yeah. Same. So great. All right. Well, again, just follow us on Twitter at casualcinecast to vote in that poll. It'll be out by the time you hear this episode, and also it'll be linked in the show notes so you can get to it that way as well.
All right. Stay tuned to this channel. We will be posting the results of our next Casually Criterion poll. We'll talk about it on the show next week. And by the way, next week we are doing Judas and the Black Messiah. So stay tuned.
Yeah, I'm excited about that one. And
me too, man. I've been hearing a lot about this movie, and it looks cool.
Yeah, I'm very interested in watching it. Just nominated for a Best Picture Oscar, so definitely one we need to watch and catch up on. So I'm excited.
Absolutely.
But yeah, thanks for talking to me about the Before Trilogy, Mike. Thank you,
It was
listeners.
my pleasure, sir.
Good. Thank you, listener, for listening. And thanks, as always, to Jake Wagner Russell for doing our intro and outro music. If you want to hear more of his music, you can do so at soundcloud.com/bopscotch. And until next week, Mike, see you later.
See you later.